A couple of months ago, on an island off the coast of Thailand, I got in a really bad motorcycle accident and I broke both my wrists. And the crash could have been a lot worse. I hit my head really hard. I got this gash across my forehead, and I realized that if my arms hadn't absorbed most of the impact, it probably would have snapped my neck. And if it hadn't been that tiny difference, when I crashed, I was on a motorbike and my bike flew up in the air and nearly landed on top of me. That could have crushed me. It felt like in that moment I couldn't process it during the crash, and immediately afterwards when I was rushed to an emergency clinic and got x-rays and got my casts on. But as I thought about that experience and I had time to let it sink in, I really started to realize that that was kind of a near-death experience. Like I was so close. I had no idea. Like I passed out when the crash happened. I remember the last thing was I was riding up this hill trying to learn how to ride this motorbike on this really, really steep road because this island was sort of short and tall. And I went off the road. My bike flew up 10 feet in the air, and I just landed with my arms out in front of me, slammed my head against the ground, and woke up when my brother was pulling me out of the ditch, getting the bike up and everything. But in that moment, I was honestly just grateful. I was grateful to be alive, grateful to realize that it could have been so much worse. Not even just that my arms were broken and I wasn't dead, but I could have had an eyeball gouged out. I could have broken multiple teeth. So many different things could have happened. And in a way, I kind of got off with a slap on the wrist. I did not realize how dangerous what I was doing was in that moment. I didn't realize that it could have been, the end for me. And it's something that we don't like to think about or dwell upon. And a lot of the time, it's just so far from our mind, we're not really paying it much attention. But really, it's a fragile thing. This existence isn't guaranteed. When I was younger, I had two cousins get in a fatal car accident. And to this day, my aunt is devastated by it. She posts on their birthdays every year. She talks about them. She's had a kid since then, and she likes to tell her kids stories about what they were like, what his siblings were like, even though he'll never get to meet them. Life is such a fragile thing. Sometimes I'll go driving one day and I don't consider the possibility that I might never come back. Or maybe not me, but the people around me. Like some people, I give them kind of a half-hearted goodbye because I just assume I'll see them again someday. But what if that again someday never happens and that's the last interaction you had with this person? Like, it's a hard way to feel, but it really is so true. I feel like we don't accept how real death is. It's the sort of thing where you assume you'll get to live a long, happy life, and it happens to people around you when you've already kind of accepted it and come to terms with it, and it's expected to some extent. But what's even more tragic is when it just comes out of left field and takes the life of someone really young. I remember before we went on this trip, me and my brother, my family, my mom was trying to get me to sign up for life insurance. So I, went and got a blood test, got all this testing done, talked to this insurance agent. And the whole time I kind of thought it was funny because I never really expected that to be a possibility. I never really thought about what might happen if I actually died. For whatever reason, I've just assumed like I'm just young and I'm careful and, how likely is it that I could really hurt myself that bad that I die? And, when I was getting on that motorbike and trying to learn how to ride it up that hill, it was never a thought in my mind that I could screw it up so badly that I could accidentally get myself killed. Like, that's a really scary thought. And it's not something I feel like we should give too much power to. I don't think we should fear death, but I think we should use death as an advisor. We should live in accordance with that reality because I think it's far more real than most people realize, and it's just a step behind you in a way. It's always listening and watching and seeing an opportunity. And I think, the people in your life, the people you care about, are not guaranteed to always be around. No one has some firm time limit, some guaranteed, space of life that you'll be able to experience with them. I really like this thing that this guy named Bob Proctor says, where he has an hourglass on a table and he says, you know, this is our lives in a way, but we can only see the bottom half. The hourglass, the sand that had poured to the bottom. He says we have no clue how much is at the top here. And he gave a story about a friend of his who was 15, and he got in a car accident and he died. And he said, this boy probably thought that he had the rest of his life ahead of him. He probably thought that he had another 70 years, but he couldn't see the top of that hourglass. It's like they say that people have two lives in a way, and the second one starts when they realize that they're going to die. Like people who get diagnosed with cancer, it's like suddenly once you put a firm time limit on that, you start living differently. You start seeing the world in a different way. And it's almost like because it's so far from mind, we don't really embody that. We don't try to live as if that's a possibility or as if it might happen to us or those around us. Like, it's made me start to really hug people in a way that it might be the last time I'm hugging them. Say goodbye to them in a way that it might be the last time I say goodbye. See and feel every experience as if it might be the last time I see or experience that thing. Makes me feel like I want to close all the books in my life, like tie up all the loose ends, have everything just in a satisfied place where if something happened to me, I would be content with my life. It makes me feel like I don't want to wait to pursue the things I really care about because the time to do those things might never come. I think it's interesting. I heard this story about this girl who had cancer, and it was like she was told she had a certain amount of time, and, everyone around her assumed she had this amount of time, and so they spent a lot of time with her, and the closer and closer it got to that deadline, they would spend more and more time with her because they knew that her time was running up. And then one day, she was stabbed on the street. She was mugged and she resisted, I guess, or something. She ended up dying of something completely unrelated to her cancer before her deadline was supposed to be. So everyone in her life assumed that, maybe they would start to see her more when that time got a little bit closer to the end. Maybe they'd be able to take some time out of their day to go talk with her, when she only had a month left. But maybe she still had 6 months and it didn't seem like that big a deal. And then she was stabbed. And then you realize that could have been anyone else in your entire life. This girl with cancer tragically had to get stabbed for them to realize that, but that's the truth. You don't have to come down with some terrible illness. You don't have to get in some crazy crash. The world is a dangerous place, and there's thousands of little things that could cause that. And I think we live so far away from that reality that we don't really let ourselves feel the consequences of our actions.